Hello and welcome to Spark by Jana Marie Foundation. Through these web-based videos, we will provide an opportunity to create open dialogue and engage in honest conversations about mental health in today's world. I'm Marissa Vasiri, president and founder of the Jana Marie Foundation. The Jana Marie Foundation harnesses the power of creative expression and dialogue to spark conversations, build connections, and promote mental well-being among young people and their communities. With Father's Day right around the corner, we thought we'd take this opportunity to focus on the mental health of young men in our community. For men of all ages who've been told through societal norms to man up or be strong, reaching out may seem scary or perhaps even go against cultural expectations. However, over the past several years, we have witnessed growing activism and interest around the subject of male mental health. Today, we look to further this conversation. I'm honored to be joined by Miriam Powell, Jana Marie Foundation's Community Engagement Manager, and Dr. Peter Montminy, child psychologist and founder of A Mindful Village. Good morning.
Good morning, Marissa.
Good morning.
So Dr. Montminy, thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It is a very important conversation.
Yeah, when it comes to boys, we've all heard phrases such as man up or suck it up or even real men don't cry. How do you think phrases like these affect young men when it comes to discussing mental health or even reaching out if they feel like there is a concern?
Well, I think it puts a really heavy burden on our boys and young men growing up when it paints people, in this case, boys, into a corner and thinking that that's their only option, right? And there's, as you know, I'm a big fan for not going to the extremes one way or another. There's a time to suck it up. There's a time where that's an important message, an important part of resilience to be able to kind of step up, suck it up. But if we keep giving the message that that's the only option that boys have, they get trapped into the idea that, well, what do I do with these other feelings that I have? What do I do when I do feel like I need to cry or I want to connect with somebody? And it really sets kids up in a really unhealthy way. So to me, I think we want to be able to really take a look more closely at in what ways, when would you kind of suck it up more and when would you reach out? When is it okay to break down and cry? That there's a time and place for everything. And really to just soften the message or be more realistic with the message. If even saying soften the message maybe already puts up some resistance for men to think about, I don't want to be soft. Let's get more realistic then, all right? It's ridiculous to say you're never going to cry or you shouldn't cry, right? And yet, yes, we get that message all the time. So it's really important to kind of not buy into this distorted worldview that there's only one way to be a man and that there's a time and place for these different ways of being. And then let's try to guide our young men into when and where and how can they be more open and vulnerable, and when and where and how do they need to kind of be strong and stoic. And we might say that that's, again, healthy for any human being to be thoughtful, and in particular for our boys and men.
We know relationships with adults are extremely important in the lives of young people. In your opinion, how do parental attitudes to mental and emotional health affect how boys view their own mental and emotional well-being?
Well, it affects it a lot, right? We have a common saying in the work I do with kids and families, and just as a parent of four myself, right? And now grandparent, I'm happy to say. Uh, kids don't always listen to what we say, but they always imitate what we do. They always pay attention to and listen to what we do, right? And actions speak louder than words. So clearly we're a very important, role model as caregivers, as parents for our kids. And we're not the only ones, but it's important for us to kind of pay attention to what are the actions, what are the implicit messages, the implicit biases that we're all trying to be more aware of right now, whether it's along racial lines or gender stereotype lines or whatever it may be. And I keep thinking about the importance of just coming back to awareness and appreciation of our core values and living our core values. So I think it's really vital for people to kind of pause and reflect, what are my core values? What is it I wish to share with my kids? And when, we're about to have our first child, or early on with the preciousness and innocence of our babies, sons or daughters, we always have great aspirations, and it's an opportunity to reflect. But then in the busyness of life, we kind of forget, and there's drift, and we're not paying attention to what really matters to us, right? If honesty is an important core value, if integrity is an important core value, if fairness is an important core value, all of which can be masculine and feminine in my worldview, but certainly those are core values that I think most men can relate to and say, good sportsmanship, fairness is important. You want to raise a son to be respectful and to be a man in that way. What I'm getting at is, if we don't take the time to reflect on that and live it and embody it and look at how are my actions speaking louder than my words, how am I modeling this for my children, and just really living it each day, let alone discussing it, I think that's where the real value comes in. And sorry if I rambled a bit.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think you kind of touched on this next question that we had, which was, that there are so many male role models in the lives of our children, which could be fathers or grandfathers, teachers or neighbors, you name it, coaches. And so how, going kind of back to that first conversation and tying in what we just talked about, how do we teach kids when it's okay to show emotions, and how do we, kind of foster those behaviors? And then how, as role models, do we also model that? What tools or techniques could we use to really help with furthering these conversations?
Yeah. Well, Marissa, as you know, I'm a big proponent and practitioner of mindfulness, and see that as kind of a core gateway skill or portal skill to anything else. And briefly, let me say why and how I think it really relates to your question and our current topic today. Again, when under stress, we revert back to that primitive fight or flight, emotionally reactive part of our nervous system. We just react without thinking, right? And oftentimes that's when then we get in trouble, and later we say, oh, I did something I regretted, right? Versus when we can connect with our upstairs rational thinking brain, when we can be more thoughtfully responsive rather than emotionally or impulsively reactive. We tend to literally step up to be more of our higher selves in the world, literally our higher thinking and our higher best selves. And so if we don't pause to bring conscious awareness to what's the situation, to what are my, again, value-based thoughts about this, how am I living in integrity with that? How am I modeling that for my son? How am I communicating that verbally and non-verbally to my son? Maybe I'm not a big talker. Maybe I'm not a big touchy-feely, but how am I embodying thoughtfully what it means to be responsive and responsible? Response-able. Responsible is really response-able, which means you're connecting to a thoughtful way of being in this stressful situation. Conflict, resolution, de-escalating. Assertiveness is different than aggressiveness, right? And how am I discerning the difference and modeling or practicing the difference? If we don't bring conscious awareness or mindful awareness to the moment, it's much harder for us to then step into a thoughtful response. And we're going to be far more likely to just emotionally react and perhaps later regret what we did. So again, hopefully we can embody this as role models for all our children, and in particular today's topic for our sons.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some really important distinctions that you make there. And I appreciate that, especially the assertiveness and aggressiveness. That's an interesting thing to think about.
Can I play off that a little bit, Miriam? And thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Because, right, again, we are reactive. We polarize about anything nowadays, right? We dichotomize it. It's either or. You're on our side or their side. The othering, happens in so many ways. Talk radio, simple tweets. We got to quick, take a stand, and it's this or this, and that's just bull beep, bleep. I mean, let's just pause for a minute and think. What are ways in which being strong, so men need to be strong. Great. Let's be conscious and mindful of in what way are we strong? Yeah, let's be assertive. Let's be a warrior. Let's be protective in a healthy, morals-based, compassionate way, right? So assertiveness versus aggression. It's not all or none. It's paying attention to those shades of gray, if you will, about how we're carrying any of that. Being sensitive means you're weak. Come on, pause, breathe. Do any men want to be, pause, breathe, and really, do any persons, including any men, want to be in an intimate relationship where they're not sensitive to their partner and where they don't want their partner to be sensitive to them, right? We may put layers of defensiveness, socialized or through our own personal trauma, layers of armor over our emotions. But there's not a person of any gender, please, who doesn't want to be connected, who doesn't want to feel loved, supported, and understood. And in those connections is where we find strength. So how can we be strong and sensitive, not either or? And I could go on, but I better stop.
Okay, well, I know you said we better stop, but I am going to go a little off script here.
Great.
Just because, again, in what you're saying, you raised such a good point. The whole purpose of this spark and why we're here is kind of the art of conversation. And in what you just pointed out, I feel like it's so hard just to even have conversations anymore because of the extremes and the spectrum. And it just seems it becomes more combative rather than conversational. And
Yeah.
I think it's just a dynamic that, makes it challenging for anyone. I know we're talking about, young boys especially, but it just makes it difficult for anybody to find those necessary connections, like you were saying. So again, we're just really grateful that you're willing to sit and have this conversation with us and hopefully, model that behavior and just help people to understand how critical it is, especially right now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it reminds me of one of Stephen Covey's, 7 Habits of Effective People, and others who, one of my core kind of mottos, if you will, and creeds to live by is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And if conversations don't start with deep listening, if it's just, let me wait for you to be quiet so I can get my point across and show how I'm right, and then assertiveness turns to aggression, verbally or otherwise, right? Pause, breathe, allow some space, and do I have an intention? Do I have intentional attention to listen in this conversation, to be present and seek first to understand and then to be understood? And in fact, one of the things, resources, I'll jump ahead a little bit. I was looking up the Listening Project out of NYU is a wonderful project trying to re-socialize boys to, men and get healthy. And it starts with literally reconnecting with others through deep listening. And I think it's a vital skill that we need to start with to change, as you said beautifully, to be more conversational rather than combatant. So yeah, thank you for that.
So when it comes to mental health, some protective factors include definitely self-confidence, good problem-solving skills, and strong relationships with an adult. So what can we do to build some of those protective factors and empower young men to reach out when it comes to their mental health?
One of the, again, kind of socialized male attributes, right, is to man up, as we've talked about. So let's start there. Manning up, hopefully we're communicating and modeling how manning up for our sons means owning up. Owning up realistically to your strengths and your struggles, to the fact that every one of us is perfectly imperfect, that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to always be, again, this real men don't cry kind of thing. But we can start with acknowledging and owning up to the fact that we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have strengths and struggles. And when we are more self-aware of that reality, when I state it in the abstract, who is going to deny that it's true that we all have strengths and weaknesses, right? But then let's get real again and look in the mirror and say, what are mine? And when we can get real with owning up to the fact that I have struggles, I have weaknesses, I have things that I'm not perfect or good at, we get quickly to the idea of our interconnected nature, of the fact that we are not alone in this, that we are connected and need others to thrive. And again, if you want to borrow from socialized male stereotypes, there's no I in team. So if you're going to be a good teammate, you need to bond with your brothers. And I would say we need to bond with our brothers and sisters, right? And to create healthy communities. So when we can acknowledge and own up to our strengths and weaknesses, recognize we do need others. We need to be good teammates in both giving and receiving help. And we start to normalize that message. Now we lay a foundation where it's okay to get that help. I don't care if it's with your teacher or your coach or your minister or rabbi or a therapist, right? Going to psychotherapy and to see a psychologist like myself is not the answer for everybody. What matters is you find where can I be connected? Brene Brown's famous vulnerability stuff is big nowadays, but of course it's a little bigger message in the women's kind of side of our humanity right now, and maybe too vulnerable for some men to digest. Though again, I think it's healthy for all of us to think about. But we can at least say again, how can I really accept that there's no I in team, I can't go it alone, and combat this self-reliance message that we know is toxic, leads to toxic masculinity, leads to higher rates of aggression and violence, higher rates of male depression and suicide later in life, which is increasing tremendously amongst middle-aged men. We need to get out of this go it alone mentality and say, again, when is that a strength? When's that an asset to be self-reliant? We're not throwing that out the window either. But we're saying, and when do I need to? When can I benefit? When can I strengthen and do better by my family, do better by my community as well as by myself, to reach out and connect with others to help me with my struggles? And that I would say that is incredibly manning up, not weak.
You touched on this a little bit when we were talking earlier, but can you think of some resources that would be beneficial in helping people to continue or to spark conversations about mental and emotional health, especially with boys?
Well, I mentioned the listening project from the Project for the Advancement of Our Common Humanity in New York City, which is a great little program. There's lots of programs, but one I happen to just be reading right now, a book, Denzel Washington's A Hand to Guide Me, which I'm finding incredibly inspirational. And it starts from the roots of the Boys and Girls Clubs of America that he really connected with and got mentorship with early on in life. And then he writes about and edits a book of famous leaders. And this was a few years back, 2006 now, I think, but still highly relevant. A Hand to Guide Me. The mere title of the book, again, shows we can't do it alone, right? But it's also from a strong male kind of written perspective. So I'm happy to be reading that right now and drawing a lot of inspiration from it. So I'll just throw that out again, the good work that you're doing with this very program and others. So we look for, again, whether it's faith-based or mental health-based, where are community-based resources, sports-based or otherwise. And again, let's give room for arts-based, right? Projects and connections. Where are we finding places to connect in the community and reach out, I think is what's so vital, and why I think it's so vital. And I'm truly honored to be a part of this project that you're doing right now. Hopefully it can bring some good to kids struggling out there, for sure.
Well, we hope so too, and we really do sincerely thank you, Dr. Montminy, for joining us for today's conversation and our inaugural episode of Spark. And Spark is just that. It's an opportunity to spark dialogue, build connections, and strengthen our communities by joining in these very important conversations that need to be had together. So for those who watch, we thank you for tuning in. We hope you found today's topic helpful and meaningful. And we really do look forward to sharing more time together to continue these important conversations. For more information on Jan Marie Foundation and information on future Spark episodes, you can visit our website at janmariefoundation.org. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.